Hela, welcome to Coffee with Avila. I'm Aviana Lemaire, and on this channel we discuss neurodivergence and greater living. And today I want to talk about the concept of, I don't want to discuss the concept of boundaries on a grander scale. What I want to discuss is how I personally see boundaries, how they function, and why I sometimes don't even share that I have them with people. I think part of the best way to get into this is because something has reminded me today. Another very uninteresting conversation with someone who just, for whatever reason, cannot process something that I've said. And I'm wondering, I don't really know how to cut off a relationship with somebody in a loving way, because you can be as loving as you want, but sometimes it just comes off like it's nasty simply because of what you're doing and not what you say or how correct you are. Like if you have nothing in common with someone and frankly they bother you and they violate your boundaries and they do it with a smile. There are different levels. Some people will just fly in your face because something that's very wrong in them is not able to process someone else having worth. Sometimes people have a sick idea of what worth means, and so they believe in their own worth and they don't believe in someone else's. This is something that we seem to run into a lot as autists. Frankly, we live in a world where in a lot of places, a lot of people believe us to simply be a walking iteration of a disease or someone who is diseased. And I'll never challenge a person who's autistic and says autism is a disease or a disability or I am disabled, because that is your story and your experience. And if that's what you have and that is what you've been through, that is 100% yours to process and to state and to self-advocate for. This is why I'm here telling my story, because I believe in self-advocating. My story is I personally am not diseased or disabled, and I have been treated throughout the course of my life as if A, there was something wrong with me, B, it could never be fixed. And having someone telling you there's something wrong with you, it causes you to be a burden to them and their lifestyle and their boundaries, and that you keep violating them in some way just by existing, and then telling you no matter what you do, as was often displayed to me, no matter what I did, it could never be fixed. I could never be believable as anything other than what I was, which was supposed to be some kind of problem. I was a problematic thing. That was, I've come to realize now, a huge violation of my personal boundaries, because I don't believe there's something horribly wrong with me. And in my personal experience, some of us will be this way. When I look back and I see how I've treated people versus how they've treated me, I know I wasn't wrong. I know I always did my best. And sometimes I did better than my best and ran out of the room or out of the situation so I could break down, because it was so destructive to me that I just couldn't deal with it. People were constantly violating me just flagrantly, and then telling me that my sheer existence was somehow violating them. And there would be all these rules about how to fix it, but none of them ever worked, and I was never doing it correctly, and I never did it with the right series of expressions on my sweet little face. And I am an exceptionally high masking autist. I have suffered because I was able to seem at the very best of my masking. What I got was, I'm the weird, quirky girl. I was never quite the perfectly normal girl, so to speak. I was the weird, quirky one. You know, I'm artistic and I do all the funny, cute, weird things that Tismer is, you know. I'd be funny and have no idea it was happening because it wasn't my neural language and it wasn't my neural humor and all that stuff, but I was just automatically like that. I was still able to do it enough that I was kind of able to get away with stuff, and it just broke me. And at some point in my life, I realized I've been through all of these different things. I had training for that. By the time I learned I was autistic, which is in my mid-30s, I already knew what was happening because I had already grown up as a female. First, I had grown up as a brown person. I was labeled black in America. And second, because those are the things that I was taught about and ran into first and had to learn about first. Second, as I grew older, I started to have to deal with the female experience. So I was very well acquainted, and on top of it, I was a Christian, and not everybody likes that. Some people are just in love with the concept, and frankly, some of them are part of the problem. And some people just hate it when they see it coming. So I've dealt with all kinds of different forms of something where something that just was about me was inherently problematic to someone else. They heard it and they made assumptions. They treated me in a different way because of it. Honey, by the time I got to 36 and learned for 100% certain that I was autistic, despite everything that made me think I couldn't be all of my life, when I finally learned, I was surprised by nothing I had been through because of it, because I had already seen it. It's the way I had already had to learn my way through life, having brown skin. It was the way I had to learn my way through life, having, what's a nice way to put it? I'll generally just say body shape, personal body part shape, because that's generally what people are thinking about. Secondary sexual organ presence is generally what they're judging you by, because quite frankly, a lot of people, if they can't see that specific thing, they treat you differently. Some of us will know, as females, if you're anonymous online, you get treated differently than you do if you say, oh, I'm female, by the way, or if they can see you, or if you have an avatar that looks feminine in some way, like if it's a flower and they think you're a girl, they'll treat you differently than if your avatar is, I don't know, a tree. Some kind of plant that doesn't scream girly in most people's minds. The only thing I could think of was a tree. Maybe because it's got wood all the time, but what I'm trying to say. Thank God I'm being funny with myself. It's been an intense day and I'm blowing off steam, but long story short, people treat us different ways based on what they're perceiving about us. I've been treated differently when people couldn't see I was brown than when they found out. There was a situation, I remember the first time online, I was clicking with someone in an acquaintance way, and I just thought at a certain point, this is something I chose to do. I was just like, I think I need to disclose that I have brown skin, because some people are really, you know how people are always like, oh, I know grandpa was really, really bad to all of the, brown kids in school, but he was really a good guy. Some people are good guys as long as they don't know that they're being kind or showing something like love, their version of love, to someone that they'd rather be unkind to or show some version of hate to. So I just remember thinking, well, dang, I'm chatting with someone online and I'm confronted with this situation where I feel like I need to tell them I have brown skin, because then at least I can find out what I'm really dealing with, and God bless me and take care of me. Everything was fine, but I just was like, I at least want to know I'm not forming some kind of acquaintanceship with someone where it comes to a point where they realize what's up and then boom, there's an issue. I don't even want to be in bed with that. That's like, as far as the term sleeping with the enemy goes, that's not something I was interested in either. But by the time I went through all of that stuff in life, running into the way I was treated as an autist, and suddenly knowing, studying, paying attention, doing the research, seeing how other people view us, and suddenly understanding why all of these insane things had been happening all of my life, it made perfect sense, because I'd already run into it before. Somebody was trying to look at me and make a decision or a judgment and treat me in some different way because some part of them that was formed only to that point needed to treat everything they thought of as different as if that difference made a difference in their worth. And me being different didn't make a difference in my worth, at least not in a way that put me underneath. I see my blessings when it comes down to ways I know I've behaved better. For instance, my personal experience is I am the empathic autist. So I've spent my entire life, kind of, to sum it up quickly, understanding everyone else's point, even when they were badly mistreating me. And greatly because of my capacity to understand someone else without having gone through what they've been through, I have behaved in a better way. So if anything, maybe they were the different person, the ones who were trying to mistreat me, maybe they were different in a way that made their worth less. But because I am who I am, and I don't behave in that way, I didn't see it in that way. I just saw them as someone who was only formed to that point. Now this weirdly leads into one of the things I wanted to talk about. I'm not fully sure how to explain this, but I just said, I see people who behave in a certain way as people who have formed to the point where that behavior is what they can do or process or offer. And one of the reasons why I don't tend to challenge people with my personal boundaries, I might have to tell a little bit of a backstory before I explain this, but I have a way of looking at life where I meet people where they are at. That's the term people use. So if I have a boundary and a person cannot, for whatever reason, they are not capable to respect that in another human life, they just cannot say, spirit mate in life, you do get to have a boundary, you do get to put up a wall before something about you is violated. You are worth what I am worth. I'm going to do unto you as I would have you do unto me. If they cannot do that, I see that as a personal, frankly, I see that as a personal disability that they have. I'm able to respect other people's boundaries and they're not able to respect mine. So I just see that as something they cannot do. I don't care why they can't do it. I don't care if they think they're smart enough or that they make enough money or that they came from the right neighborhood. If you cannot do it, you in my mind are disabled from doing it. It doesn't matter what the reason is. So I don't want to challenge somebody to do something when I know that they cannot do it, because whether it's an intellectual challenge, whether it is taking somebody who struggles to do basic math and trying to teach them trigonometry, if you realize that that's not something they can do or it's not something they can do now, I would consider it to be cruel to keep stressing them out with it without at least going back to the basics and trying to build them to where they can get there. Now, when it comes down to personality traits, it's really not my job to give somebody the basics, like teach them to be a better person, you know. It's not my job to do that. It's not my job to raise you. It's definitely not my pleasure to do that. A person who wants to learn something can learn something from someone else, including me, if they want to, but you have to be in that place. I can learn something from someone else if I want to, but that's because I'm in that place. It's just not my job to try and teach somebody a bigger math, and it's not my job to try to teach somebody a bigger spiritual capacity or mental function or psychological capability or the difference between them having worth and them having some twisted, inflated concept of what worth should mean, and somehow conflating that with just being so much more important than everybody that nobody else gets to have any boundaries or anything. So for me, just to make it clear, if I realize that a person is repeatedly just unable to respect my boundaries, I will no longer give them permission to respect it or not, because I now see that they are, in whatever capacity, disabled from doing that. And if I know that they're not able to do it, I'm not going to ask them to do it because I think it's cruel. Another way that this links is that a lot of times people are kind of addicted to horrible behaviors. And a lot of times our boundaries will be violated by people who have very horrible behaviors. And as a neurodivergent, I know we're not supposed to know that, and we're not supposed to talk about it. And that's why I'm here knowing it and talking about it. I think it's time. Some of the people who are mistreating us are not so innocent. and they do know that they're being nasty and they just want to win. They might never admit that because they don't want to be looked at that way. They want to be, part of the religion of being a good person, and they need to be like a saint in the religion of being a good person. And if they admit that they know they're being nasty because they have somebody who suffers with autism and they can't stand whatever it is they can't stand today, then they're not going to seem like a good person, and they're not going to be all, tweet worthy, where they go out and talk about how they support the cause and light it up blue and whatever else. Some people are just hiding their horrible behavior because they know it's horrible behavior. When it comes down to somebody who's just not okay, whether they just choose to be terrible or they have some kind of problem that kind of keeps them compulsively doing bad things, and for some reason, for whatever reason, they can't seem to stop or rein it back, because you can be addicted to a behavior. I'm not going to get into that, but there are a lot of cases where a person is hooked on, compelled toward, and or addicted to some type of destructive behavior. And frankly, one of the definitions for that has always traditionally been if it's causing you harm and causing other people harm in your life, harm to relationships, things like that. So you do run into some people who are just living that life where their behavior is so out of control that they're being affected, the people they know are being affected, whether they love them or it's just someone at work. This is another situation where I see it as, the reason I bring this up as a context is if you were kind of hooked into a behavior and you can't do better, I count that as what I was just talking about. Meet someone where they are, and if they can't do better, don't request it because it's cruel. If a person is compelled to do their worst or to do something that is not the best option, and I continue to, for instance, expose my personal needs or my personal information or my personal vulnerabilities to them, I see that as straight up, once I know that's the kind of person it is, because of who I am and what I know in life, if they prove that they can't do better and they'll always choose the worst path, and I continue to feed them more things, vulnerabilities, information, so that they can do their worst to me, I consider that to be straight up enabling them. Because I see that as a person who, again, is only formed or well to the point where they can do horrible things and make bad choices. I don't consider that to be them living their best life. And it does not, excuse me, hiccuping. It does not give me an experience where I'm living my best life. So if both of us are now losing, why would I continue to do the thing, feed the information, show the vulnerability, whatever it is? Why would I continue to do whatever it is that feeds that darker, nasty, hideous part of them that needs to peck down like a little nasty bird, Don't do it. If I'm feeding them a seed that's causing them harm, stop causing them harm. I see that as enabling, so I stop feeding them that information. That's one of the ways in which I have boundaries sometimes. It's not so much that there are a bunch of things that I don't want them to do to me. It's that there are places where I'm not going to allow them to do anything new. I hope that doesn't sound too complex or too vague, but I will try to go into it for a second. Apparently I've been talking for 18 minutes, so why not? We'll see how this winds up. It's been a long day, and I've recently had a conversation, short conversation, that's got me thinking about this. And I'm in a situation where I'm wondering, is it the time to cut off the entire relationship with someone because they keep violating me in some way? And it doesn't matter why it's happening, it just keeps happening. So I'm no longer feeding them any more seeds for them to just go crazy about. I'm not giving them more information, and I'm not tempting them with new stuff about me that they can come after or try to say something about that I don't like. So I'm no longer enabling the behavior. But sometimes you've already, like in this situation, you've already shared just enough with somebody that they can just keep grabbing onto the stuff they already know. So I don't have to enable anymore, because they can still come and peck at whatever was already there. And since I don't enjoy that, I'm trying to figure out what to do next. And I'm not a person who's just like, I'm going to ghost you, I'm going to cut you off, I'm going to avoid you forever, I'm never going to tell you why. But I also don't know how kindly, because it's a weird situation I can't really explain and I don't want to get into. It's a weird situation where I'm not sure how to do it in a loving way. Because for various reasons, it's a person who I now believe does not have the capacity to do better. And some part of me has a level of compassion for someone who keeps embarrassing themselves, doing their worst with somebody who is constantly doing their best. Because you might not realize it yet, but they might not realize it yet, but maybe at some point in life, they have the capacity to look back and be deeply embarrassed or humiliated, you know? And I don't want to put any salt there so that when they grow to the point that they realize that's a wound, then they get all salted in the wound, because my response, like, I don't want to be nasty on any level. I don't want to be someone who, I don't know how to explain it. No one really taught me how to lovingly assert a boundary that ends a relationship. And so I'm having to make a lot of this stuff up as I go, and I'm busy thinking about it. But I've run into this situation, like I said, where it's the case where a person, for whatever reason, is disabled from doing any better. And I remember a long time ago having a chat with a friend, and at the point in my life where we had this chat, I had a very quick answer, but previously in my life I wouldn't have had that quick answer because I wouldn't have known. And the chat with a friend was fairly simple. We were talking about things, personal relationships, and sharing. And they were sharing about a relationship where their boundaries were constantly violated. And they are learning to form new ones and to heal. And so they said something about this individual and what they wanted to take place between them. Excuse me, let me get a sip of coffee. My throat's getting a little, oh, I'm out of coffee. I'm gonna have to drink some tea. Oh, I can't pour the tea right now without putting a huge thing in the video I'm gonna edit out. I don't know. I'll finish because my throat's getting a little uncomfortable now. But long story short, the person was talking about this relationship with someone else who violates their boundaries. They were like, this is what I would prefer to happen. So I responded, well, maybe that's a place where you want that to be one of your new boundaries. And they said, well, I can't have that boundary because this person will never respect it. And in that moment, my answer was, and what I said back was, they do not have to know that you have the boundary. You just have to have it. They don't have to respect it. I had learned this and taught it to myself because of what I had been through and seeing other people who didn't know this philosophy. So what I'm going to explain, because I'm not sure how many of us have had this explained to us, a boundary is not something that you put up in the hopes that someone else sees it and responds to it. It's not like putting up a stop sign somewhere on a street where nobody's paying attention in a small town and just hoping that when people see that stop sign, they're going to actually stop. It's not a choice that you're giving. It's not a situation where they can just see it and decide, nobody's seeing me, I'm just going to blaze past it like I did no wrong. It's not asking for permission. A boundary is almost the exact opposite of asking for permission, because it is saying, this is what I will not tolerate. It's not something that they're doing. It's not something you put forward and ask them to do. Because if you do it that way, a person who's unformed, who's disabled from respecting it, can just say, I ignore this boundary and blaze right past it. The way a boundary functions is that it's something that you do. Okay? This makes it a bit more stressful, and this is why some people dislike having them, and we don't know how to have them, and it can become stressful because we feel the weight on us. But if we don't know how it works and we're making it up as we go, like me earlier in my life, if we don't know how boundaries work and we're making them up as we go, we don't know why it feels so heavy and there's such a weight on us when we take up a new boundary. And the reason is because it's something on us. It's not asking someone else to do something. It's changing our own behavior. So an example of this would be Long story short, oh my gosh, this is a really good example. I'm going to go into detail, but just slightly. Someone I have known and loved in my life has had a huge problem with it's been a bigger problem than what it's going to sound like, but the phone, when it got to a place where everyone could reach them and call and get in touch all the time, the phone was always ringing. There's always someone on the phone. There's always another message. There's always something else to deal with. And the person's life got eaten by a phone. A lot of people can relate to this or have seen this in today's age, I'm sure. This was something I witnessed happening back in the days of a rotary dial phone or a slimline phone or the little ones you pick up off of we still have those, but the house phone, the landline. This was happening back in the days of a landline where you had a cord that might be straight or might be spiral curled, like you might spiral curl your hair, and it just went to the wall and connected, so you're kind of stuck in one place, and your life was now an issue of wherever you could get with that cord attached. Can you get 5 feet away? Can you get 15? Will it stretch a little bit? Because if it won't stretch, you're stuck at 15, you know? This person was contacted by everyone. It got out of control. They didn't know how to assert their own personal boundaries. They thought the boundary was a sign you put up and hope someone will see it and pay attention. So they kept saying, at some point they were like, you're not going to call me after this time. I'm not available at that time. And they told people, and they waited for people to respect it. No one respected it. People kept calling, and this is in the majority of people's nature. Some of us will hear that and say, oh, then I'm not going to call after that time. Okay. And then you have to make decisions like, oh, it's 10 minutes before that time. I wonder if it's okay to call them just to tell them this little point and then get off the phone, because I don't want them to think I'm violating their boundary. Like, I would be thinking that. But some people are just like, oh, well, I can't learn except through personal experience, so I guess I'm going to keep calling, and if they keep picking up, I guess that means I don't have to respect the boundary. That's what happens when you ask someone else to assert your boundary for you, and I learned this watching that situation. It didn't teach me how to have a real boundary, but it definitely taught me a way that didn't work for having boundaries. Long story short, people kept calling. They called at the time, right before the time, after the time. Before I knew it, it was just completely over, and it was always on the phone, and the person's always talking about how they're always on the phone. Nobody's respecting the boundary. And at the time, because I'm me and I had my style of logic, I just thought, well, yeah, that's because you are asking them for permission to have a boundary in your own life. And none of these people were enabled to behave in that manner. They were disabled from respecting that boundary, and so they couldn't do it. So this individual with the phone problem was asking something of those people that they couldn't do, which isn't particularly kind. It just generally in life, if a person is not able to do something, asking the exact thing that they're not able to do is not kind. For an example, if you know someone who cannot safely reach something on a shelf that's 7 or 8 feet in the air, it would not be kind to ask them to go get something off of a shelf that's 7 or 8 feet in the air. Because if they can't do it, or they can't do it safely, long story short, nothing good is going to come of it. At the very best, you might end up hurting their feelings or annoying them. It just puts bad things out there that don't need to be put out there. Okay, my mouth is getting confused. It puts bad things out there that don't need to be put out there. And on top of it, these were also people, a lot of them were people who weren't particularly kind. And so you're also kind of, by asking them permission to have your own boundary and hoping that they respect it and give you that permission, which puts the weight, by the way, for making that boundary on them, and that's not their responsibility. Building your personal boundary is not someone else's responsibility. It might be easier for you, or it might seem less impolite, especially for some of us. We might have been trained that having a boundary is just not polite, that it's bothering people. But no matter how much easier it might be if you don't want to do the work, because sometimes it's hard to start a new boundary. Sometimes we don't know how. And it might be easier to hope someone else kind of does it, respects it for you and does it for you, but it's not actually their responsibility. And I don't know how often we're taught that. It's kind of our responsibility. It's a weight that sort of does have to fall on us for it to work properly. But all of these things just went whiz wonky, and it was something where the person kept saying, you know, they tried to have a boundary about the time over and over, and it never worked. Because the one thing, and I thought this as a child watching it, my logic was, okay, that's not working. Clearly what you have to do is stop picking up the phone after this time, or you pick up the phone if you're concerned that there's an emergency or something, right? You pick up the phone, hey, what's the issue? Oh, okay, well, if it's not an emergency, then I'm going to go back because it's after my time, so we can talk about this later, okay? Bye. And sometimes it's that easy. Sometimes they're not going to make it easy for you to get off the call. In my opinion, that means if they made it hard for you to get off the call when you were kind to them one day in case it was an emergency, then that means next time they call and it's past your time and they violate your boundary, well, they've proven that they can't handle having that kindness, and that by giving them that kindness, you're sort of enabling them to make the wrong choice again. So don't pick up the phone the next time. Sometimes it looks like that. Sometimes it looks like not doing a thing, like checking to see if it's an emergency. Is it an emergency? Especially if they keep doing it. If you give them a few chances and it's never an emergency, it's like, I mean, it shouldn't be a weight on your life. I've lived with that. Oh, what if it's an emergency? Or, you know, what if, God have mercy on us all. Some of us know that every time you're not ingratiating yourself to someone, someone is there off to the side to say, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you being more polite? Why aren't you being nicer? You need to be nicer. What happens if they don't wake up tomorrow and this is the last way you treated them? Or you didn't spend that extra time. You didn't go that extra mile to be really sweet and adorable. And I've had some of that stuff put on me. I pray that God deals with them according to the content of their heart. I pray this constantly. And I'm just going to leave it at that, because putting that kind of weight on someone, I was a very empathic being, and I was already concerned about everybody else's well-being, and I was already being taught how to destroy myself in order to theoretically help everyone else's well-being. So the last thing I needed was somebody putting even more weight on me about this stuff. I hadn't been taught the boundaries, and now I was being taught how to violate my own boundaries. It's not even an issue of just letting other people violate it. Now I was being taught to violate my own boundaries without even being asked. Bizarre. But I just thought at that point, early on in life, what you need to do is not ask them to stop calling. You need to stop picking up the phone. And there were a lot of problematic people who didn't give a flip for somebody else's well-being, particularly this person. The only thing that works is not picking up the phone. It's the only thing that has ever worked. I have remained updated on this situation for many decades, and I don't know that there's been a time when this person has asked for permission to have a boundary, and the person they asked actually did it. The weight is on us. It's not always that easy. Sometimes you don't want to choose not to pick up the phone. Even with this person, sometimes they were concerned about the health of people that they knew. It's just that that was a concern that plagued them for decades, so that it continued to go on and on and on. And that's never going to stop, because there's always going to be someone else where you're super worried. There are so many different levels of mental and of just holistic human health that have to go into being able to have a firm boundary and not let your own fear be the impetus for you to violate your own boundary. Because you could think, what if it is an emergency? What if something's horrible? And then you pick up the phone 3-4 hours past your cutoff time, and like this other person I dealt with in life, you just end up staying on the phone for many hours after that because you didn't know how not to answer it. Sometimes we don't know how to get off of it and hang it up. And I just want to say, this is probably something that should be talked on more, but in the moment, I just wanted to address it. I thought I would address it quickly. I had no idea I had so much to say on it. But I think I covered a lot of points about how I think about it. And honestly, there's an amount of power in learning if anyone didn't already know. There can be an amount of power in learning that your boundaries are not about getting permission from someone else. They are about you giving yourself permission. You get to make that decision. You get to make those actions. And at the exact same time, there's a duality to that power, because with any true power comes great weight and responsibility. This is why they say the crown is heavy. The weight and responsibility for that precious thing filled with these beautiful, scintillating gems that is power has to rest squarely on your head, figuratively speaking. And the crown of your own power is heavy. So at the same time that there is the side, in that duality, there's the side that is pure power. I can make my own boundary. I don't have to ask for permission. There's the side that is pure weight, the functional side. It's the side that keeps the metal polished, the gold polished, and the gems sparkling, and make sure that they're treated well so they don't get dropped or, mistreated, and the stones don't cleave and the metal doesn't get dented and scratched and things. And the weight for that is, okay, I don't have to ask for anybody's permission to have a boundary. I can give myself that permission. But some of us, especially as autists in a world where our boundaries seem to constantly be offending somebody, but they seem to like their own boundaries very well, we don't always know what to do next. I have to give myself permission to have this boundary. But how do I do that when I don't know how, and I don't have any practice, and maybe I didn't have any examples, and there's not really anywhere I can look? And when I go ask somebody, if I talk to a professional, if I talk to my friends, my family, my support system, if I talk to people who don't know what this is like or don't understand and embrace the different psychology and neurology, they don't quite seem to understand my challenges in doing it. They don't understand how uncomfortable I am and how prohibitive my own discomfort is, because I don't want to be uncomfortable, and it makes me uncomfortable to make someone else uncomfortable. There are a lot of potential complexities to donning that power, that crown, the duality, the power on one side. I can give myself permission, but the function on the other side, the weight of it, how do I even do that in the first place? So I hope I've given some examples. Excuse me, there it is. My throat is tired now. I hope I've given some examples talking about the phone situation, and talking for almost 38 minutes. And if this is something where I'm looking for my phone now and I don't see my phone because I want to give my outro and I have my outro on my phone, and now somehow I've mislaid my phone. I wasn't planning on oh, there it is. I wasn't planning on recording. I'm just sitting here thinking about this. And I'm thinking about how with this situation and this person I know, I don't know if I'm at a point where my boundary has been violated to where I'm just like, that's it, we don't have a relationship anymore. And now that's something I have to figure out for myself. At 41 years of age, I might be close to figuring out for the first time in my life how to end an acquaintanceship where I think the other person thinks it might be a friendship, although I'm not fully sure why. I think it's just because I'm a very loving being and I don't mistreat people. But we don't really have anything in common, and for whatever reason, they don't have the capacity to stop violating my boundaries. So I'm not going to enable them to do it, and I'm not going to continue to ask something of them that they clearly cannot do. Where does that leave me? Maybe once I figure out what to do with that, it'll be another video, because I would love to take my experience once I know enough about it and help somebody else so they don't have to go through this. Anyway, have any thoughts? And again, this isn't a pinned comment underneath, so if you care, and I can't always pick up all this information when somebody is rattling off a million questions or things, so this is in a pinned comment what I'm about to read on all my videos. And if it's not there, I intend for it to be, and if you check another video, it's probably pinned underneath there. It's just under all of them right now. Have any thoughts or questions? Share them in the comments. Notice any gaps in the autistic, ADHD, or ADHD community conversation. Want a spiritually, mystically inclusive ND voice on a subject? Just looking for an extra opinion or viewpoint? Share your suggestions in the comments. If I can address them, I might make them into a video. Remember to like, share, subscribe, ring the notification bell for all of my newest updates, and be blessed. That's about it now. That's about it now? That's not what I say. Oh my gosh, I'm ready. I'm ready to be done, I guess. That's about it. Bye now.